This is The Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today as our top guests tackle the issues that matter with a sharp take on every story. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Weeks and Onyx Duncan.
A very good morning and welcome to another edition of The Countdown. We bring to you sad news this morning as we mourn the passing of former minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Madam Valerie Corrido-Lowe. She died this morning. We woke up to the news, and so we're bringing to you sad news. This morning we have a whole set of people in the lineup to discuss the legacy, the life and times of Miss Lowe. We have Onyx Duncan, my co-host with me this morning. Onyx, good morning.
Good morning. It's sad news this morning. And when I got the news, first thing I did, I called you, Andrew, because we know we had former Minister Valerie lined up today to speak about the National Two Shells Conference, and knowing Valerie and the passion that she had in her time as minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs, and also a member of Parliament and a national executive member of the Alliance for Change. You know, Valerie fought. She fought day and night, thick and thin. Valerie was at the face of being victimized in 2019, and all of that, Valerie went through, and she served without fear or favor, to her heritage, holding up to all the trials and tribulations that this government, the PPPC government, sends to her. But we mourn, and we have to stay strong for Valerie and stay strong for her family and for other comrades in the Alliance for Change and for Guyana in the whole.
Yeah, sad news, but she left a legacy for us to follow. We have Laura George also joining us. Laura, good morning. Sad news this morning on the life of Valerie Corrido-Lowe. We have also Dawn Hastings Williams, former minister as well, joining us. Dawn, you know minister, you were part of all of you are cabinet ministers in the AP and UFC coalition. What would you remember her by?
Good morning, Andrew, to you and Onyx and all your viewers. Thank you for having me again this morning on your countdown. First, I wish condolence to the AFC, and then to the immediate family and friends of the late Mrs. Valerie Corrido-Lowe, a former minister, a former colleague in the cabinet on the APNU AFC. I have some very good memories of Mrs. Valerie Corrido-Lowe, which I would like to share with you this morning. Valerie was very passionate about empowering women in our indigenous communities. I can recall she fighting or lobbying for projects that will bring economic stability and empowerment in our indigenous communities, especially the ones that she did in Regions 8. There is a famous dried tomato and the tomato dressing that sells in our supermarkets. That was one of her main projects that she had fought for and which was successful. Also, I remember she lobbying for another project that had to do with semi-precious stones, where you could have, made chains, rings, used those precious stones found around Mountain, Paramakatoy, Cato, and all these places. We also visited Smith Creek in Region 1, a community that needed the most attention. And I can recall she started a project to dry fish, and they have a lot of fishermen in that area. So Valerie has a legacy of fighting for the indigenous people, men, women, and girls. And I would ask the nation to remember her for these works and that her legacy continues to live on even though she's not here. We will remember history. So it is unfortunate because she would have been joining us this morning to speak about the NTC, what went all at the NTC. But she's no more, and may her soul rest in peace.
Indeed. We have also Laura George with us this morning. Laura, it's your fellow, um, Amerindian colleague. She, you had interaction with her on some occasions. What would you want to remember her by?
Oh, well, so yes, so let me first extend my condolences to the family, um, and to the larger AFC. As you would know, I recently became a member of the AFC and supporter. Well, not a recent supporter, but a member to get Mr. Nigel Hughes into the presidency. So for Valerie, my memories of Valerie was working with her as a minister as a junior minister in the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. I do remember, as Dawn says, her commitment was really calling for work to ensure that Indigenous women are empowered. She was constantly on that, and she also brought that recently when we were having discussions, putting together our action plan and all of that. Her input really was saying that there are so much immediate needs of families, the financial needs of families, and so there were ways that we were discussing to respond to those situations. Because no matter how the government says we've done this and all is well in the communities, that has not is not having an impact on the community. So she was insisting that we have to have an additional way to make sure that Indigenous women, who are the backbones of families, are empowered with projects, access to financing. Her vision was to have a bank or an Indigenous bank, specifically to whether to seek loans, grants, or to have a revolving fund. So that's part of the work that she was highlighting so much that it's there in our action plan actually. So we will be carrying on the work that she started. I like to say I like to say that whether it's to our elders, whether it's to the young people who have all of these visions and all of these ideas that they bring together in discussions, I like to say that it's always important to give credit to people's ideas and recommendations to groups. So that was one of the areas of work that Valerie was really pushing for, even up to recently in our meetings. I'm really shocked to hear of her passing. Um, I couldn't believe it when I saw the message this morning, and so really I'm sorry about this to the community. She was a village council member of the Quebana village, and so to the community of Quebana and other relatives in the district. I'd like to extend my condolences, Andrew.
Thank you so much, George, Laura George. Laura, I have also made contact with another MP currently in Parliament, Mr. Vincent Henry, and he had this to say about the Honorable Minister, former Minister Valerie Garrido Low. Here was his thoughts on her life and legacy.
He's about to travel back to Region 9. And I know, MP, thank you for taking the time before you jump into your vehicle and head back on the trail. Sir, you would have heard about the passing of Valerie Lowe, former Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. You would know that she was a champion for Amerindian rights. What would be your thoughts? What would you remember her by?
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, I saw that just now when I went into Facebook. It struck me right away as a sad blow. We have lost a stalwart. We have lost someone who always, like you said, stood up for Indigenous people's rights and had a common touch, a touch for the common, for people all over Guyana, especially Indigenous people. I recollect several trips I made with her in the hinterland. One particular one I can recollect where we went and we had to travel by road, and then road again through swamps and sort of dangerous conditions. Reptiles, etc. could have been there. And I recollect Valerie was somebody very strong. I thought that I might have had to help her along the way. Instead, she actually had to wait for me to catch up with her. A very strong lady, someone who faced any adverse condition like what we faced there and did her work, well. We slept in very not so good conditions because of where we were traveling, but we did what we had to do. So bye-bye to her. On behalf of the Guyana Action Party, on behalf of myself, my family, on behalf of the constituents who I represent, fair travel, rest in peace, Valerie. We love you. We still love you. Bye-bye.
Before you go, MP, I also know that she had grave reservation about the NTC conference. She may have had a lot of concerns because, as you all would know, that the NTC just concluded was another talk shop, and most of the information that Amerindians were about to be discussing there were not really discussed. They were just being talked to by government ministers and government and the president and the prime minister and the vice president. And Amerindian People's Affairs matters were not discussed, land rights and the mining situation and all of that. She had grave concern about that. What would you say about that?
Well, that was quite correct, because what happened, like I had mentioned before, this entity in particular, the others were to a certain extent before, that was organized by the PPP, but this one in particular was for a campaign. They were campaigning. They already they launched their campaign there. They were full of campaign campaign mode, and you could have seen that they made every effort to try to win over the Indigenous people. It was about substance and about achieving or correcting the wrongs that have been done against the Indigenous people's rights, especially in the area of mining and the problems that the people are facing. It was just, putting a plaster on band-aid and distributing this and distributing that, and then the speeches were all campaign speeches. So that was what was happening. That was their objective, the campaign. And it's unfortunate because The indigenous people have gone home, yes, maybe with some material things, but the really important decisions and actions were not taken, and so they will have to suffer again, especially those in the mining areas will have to suffer again until we become the government, and we will work actively to make relevant changes happen. The Mining Act will have to be tweaked, the Aboriginal Act will have to be revised, and even the Forestry Act will have to be touched. The Protected Areas Act also will have to be tweaked, because I have noticed that the management of that commission, protected areas, it doesn't include anybody from the protected areas. You know, you have people who are there as managers and etc. But or members of the commission. But generally, I have not seen anybody, any space for anybody there from the communities, and that has to be changed. How can we have a protected area, system and the local people, the actual people who are there living near to it or almost in it are not being represented? Something is totally wrong here. Those are my thoughts for now. Thank you.
Thank you, MP. And once again, we are very saddened that the indigenous people's community, would have lost a great soldier, a fighter, a road runner, a trail setter, a trend setter in Valerie Lowe. I know a number of other Pushals who will come out later and give their, send their condolences and so on. But MP Henry, thank you very much for sending out your condolences as well and sharing your thoughts on the late Valerie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was Minister, MP Vincent Henry sharing his thoughts on the passing of Valerie Lowe. I want to also share with you, as we get down into remembering her and to go on our passing. We got some more clips to show you about her legacy and our time, our life and time. We also going to spend this first half hour of the show remembering the life and times of Valerie Corrida Lowe. We're going to show some clips with her in Parliament debating budget debates, and some clips with her about her life and what she does and what she's been doing. When she was a minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs.
And Andrew,
yes.
It's important to note also that when former minister left Parliament, she went back to her community because she thought that she needed to empower and educate her community, and she strived, and she came out whenever it's necessary to Georgetown to deal with matters of AFC and all of the sort. But she went back home because charity begins at home. So she went back home to empower those in our community. So it's really, she's really a strong woman, like MP Henry said.
Yeah, strong indeed. I remember her, always being a woman on the ground.
Yeah,
she just liked to be on the ground. She don't like to be in an office. She's not a person to be in the office, and then behind a desk. She on the ground where the action is. She's always in a boat, on the trail, sleeping in hammock on the road. She was that woman that is a really true Amerindian, fighter warrior. Here was a clip of her that was done during Amerindian Heritage Month about her life and her legacy. We're going to play that for you right now.
Minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Valerie Corrida Lowe, also known as Val, was born March 24, the second of 10 siblings. She grew up in Regions 1 and 9. Her mentors are her parents Ignatius and Maria Garrido. Her favorite childhood memory is of seeing an anteater at the Achirib school. The anteater stood on its hind legs, prepared to do battle with a crowd of children who were excited to see it. Minister Garrido is the mother of 2 children. The minister does not consider herself a religious person, but believes in God and in the goodness of the humankind. She is actively involved in sports and is a patron for women's football in Guyana. Minister Garrido is happiest when giving her best to help persons who are in vulnerable situations. She shows them that they are special and that they hold the keys to their futures. She also loves the mountains, the creeks, and the savannas. She enjoys music, reading, movies, and attending to her kitchen garden. Minister Garrido first got into politics by joining the Young Socialist Movement, or the YSM, the youth arm of the People's National Congress, United Force Party, and in 2011 joined the Alliance for Change Party, the AFC. Before becoming a minister, she served as a member of parliament representing the Alliance for Change Party, the AFC. She was appointed minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs in the coalition government following the 2015 general and regional elections. As a strong indigenous woman and a fighter when it comes to representing her people, Minister Garrido brings a wealth of experience in addressing social ills that affect the indigenous peoples as well as empowering the nation's indigenous youth. The minister would like to see the hinterland regions become economically empowered as she embraces retirement in her traditional truli or ite roof house complemented by a kitchen garden and the sound of the wild. Her dream for the country is to see, quote, the hinterland take the lead in the success of the tourism and agricultural sectors, particularly advancing on value-added products, end of quote.
Yeah, that was, former Minister Valerie Lowe there. You know, a nice tribute to her when she was minister within the Ministry of Armed Affairs. Dawn, I know that you, serve with her in the cabinet, serve with her as a minister. What were some of the thoughts you remember her by as a minister in the parliament? I know sometimes she sits down there, quietly in the corner, but then she will get back when her time comes to speak. She was like you, you never know the lash you're gonna get until she starts to speak. Don, all some of the things you remember her as a member of parliament.
Like I said earlier, Andrew, Mrs. Garrido was very, very passionate, not only when she speaks or when she's speaking in parliament, whether it was debate or on a motion, but when she visits, when we have parliamentary outreaches and visits, she was always someone who was well spoken. She did not remain quiet for most of her times. Unlike me, I stay very quiet most times, but Valerie would speak out, even in cabinet and when she wants something to be done. She tries her best to give justifications as to why this project should be done in a certain community. And she will come up with her reasons or justifications, and the cabinet would not even want to, give her a negative answer. She goes out to ensure that whatever she requests or suggests to the cabinet is done. So that was Valerie. I know she was a lot into fashion too. So sometimes she spoke to us about, clothes, fashion. Sometimes she just, in parliament, sometimes she just showed me some designs. If I'm very close to her, look at this. What do you think about this? She was very much into fashion, and she was artistic in graphic design and all of those. So she was a very, a woman who we say wear different shoes, a woman of all jobs, but not master of none. I think that's what they say. But she was that kind of person.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to give you a taste of her in parliament. This is her here. Debate in 2016. Here is clip.
Through collaborative training with a Skype project, a USAID initiative, They will also have the opportunity to develop viable business plans and will benefit from a startup grant of $50,000. Youths will also have the opportunity to proceed to further training if they so wish. To date, there are 6 villages in the program: Paramakatoy, Mountain Foot, Bamboo Creek, Monkey Mountain, Taruka, and Tusaning. And 108 youths are benefiting from training in maths and English, carpentry and joinery, garment construction, ecotourism and hospitality, entrepreneurship studies, agriculture, capacity building, and life skills. Computer training will be added during the course of the year. Mr. Speaker, emphasis is also placed on training that directly links the community development projects that directly links with the community development projects that is funded under the GRIF, so that these projects can have a chance of becoming success stories instead of being added to the long list of failed projects and millions of dollars gone down the drain yet again. Mr. Speaker, I visited Paramakatoy in late November 2015, almost 2 months after HAZE was launched, and it was a joy to see what the garment construction class produced. They were so proud of their work, and I was proud of them. Mr. Speaker, it is a testimony to the APNU AFC government's commitment to the rounded development and empowerment of our indigenous youth across the 10 regions of this country, that in this 2016 budget, 997 million is provided for support to youth education through the Hinterland Employment and Youth Service, from which over 100 villages and across the hinterland, across the 10 regions, and 2,000 youths will benefit. We will target villages with a high youth population to begin with.
That's it. That's Valerie there, making the case in Parliament, discussing and bringing to the viewers, the viewers and the listeners and the citizenry, the work that has begun and has started under the new administration there back then in 2016, the AP and UFC government. Now, that will be, all in all, we're going to bring you more update. But before I end this segment on Valerie Corrida Lowe, I want to bring to you the statement that was put out by the AFC this morning on the passing of Valerie Lowe. It says, the Alliance for Change is deeply saddened to announce the passing, to announce the passing of one of our longest serving and most dedicated member, former Minister Valerie Corrida Lowe, who died early this morning as a result of a heart attack. Valerie Lowe was not only a stalwart of our party from its earliest days, but a fearless advocate for the people of Guyana. She served with distinction as minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs from 2015 to 2020, from 2015 to 2020, where she worked tirelessly to empower Amerindian communities and impact their rights and livelihood. Her passionate voice, unwavering commitment, and sincere compassion earned her the respect and admiration of all who worked alongside her. Minister Corrida Lowe was a trailblazer, a woman of courage, integrity, and deep conviction. She dedicated her life to public service and to the cause of building a better Guyana. Her contributions to national development and to the growth of the AFC will forever be remembered and cherished. We extend our deepest condolences to her children, family, members, friends, and all those whose lives she touched. Valerie's passing is a profound loss not only to the party, but to the entire nation. So this was the press release that came out from the AFC on the passing of Valerie Correa Lowe. I want to also tell you that the leader of the Alliance for Change, Nigel Hughes, also posted a statement on his page, and it reads this: "We have lost one of our best and most faithful members. To the family of Ms. Valerie Correa Lowe, we extend our most profound sympathies and the devastating loss. At this devastating loss, we would like to express our deep and sincere gratitude to you for having shared her with us. Her contribution, both of the party and the country, will be recorded. Val, travel safely. May your wonderful soul soar over us." And that was from the AFC leader, Nigel Hughes. And so you're going to hear more updates coming out, whatever. Whenever we hear something, we will let you know. We can give you update about her. There's going to be a book of condolences. There's going to be
night of reflection.
Night of reflection for her. I think some of the things that the party would have wanted to host tomorrow. Is it tomorrow or today?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
We had a barbecue schedule, so I'm really not sure in what direction we've been taking that. But yeah, I think I see something about making it a takeaway lunch. Or that's still to be confirmed.
Right. I know also the party will be working in conjunction with the family to ensure that we have funeral arrangements and all that in place.
Yeah.
And so we'll let you know. We'll let you know. The public will let you know when that is published. We're going to give you that update. All right. Now let's get to this NTC. What I call it? This NTC lie. This big fat lie. When you hear Miss George, when you hear that this big pomp and ceremony, this big hullabaloo, this big national thing, two shows coming from left, right, and center, bus, trucking, plane in, that kind of thing, boat, everybody up the river coming to town.
Dinners and dinners.
Yeah. Big pomp and ceremony, and then bladder. A big talk shop. Nothing done. Just a campaign speech. Everybody want to get their piece. Everybody want to hear that they got their part into the two shows, of what they have done for the two shows, and what we could do for the two shows, and we could done for Amerindian communities, and what we did for this, and what we did for that. Like it was their money. Not really the issues that the Amerindian people want to hear discussed. Matter of fact, the Tushao, the NTC conference, supposed to be like a mini parliament.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be Amerindian people alone discussing the matter.
Yep.
If they want a minister to come in and ask and answer the question, then you'll be brought in. But you know, like when I have the whole line of people like them next to them, all the PS and the staff and all of them, that is where the minister was supposed to be. Not in the middle of the whole thing, taking over the whole scene and making all kind of statement campaign speeches. The National Tushao Council Conference is a mini parliament for Amerindian people. That is what it's supposed to be like. But no, the government jump in. Everybody jump in. This minister, that minister, everybody jump in. Everybody want to have a say. And what come out of it? Nothing. What have you been hearing, George? What have you been hearing from this lie? This big fat lie of a National Tushao Council. What are you hearing on the ground that your Tushao would have been telling you at the conclusion of this whole lie conference? George.
All right. So thank you, Andrew. I was having a conversation with one of the Tushaus yesterday, actually in the hospital, visiting someone. Well, visiting a leader who's now hospitalized. They had a breakfast meeting, you know, with the regional whatever allocated parliamentarians, One of the areas she said she raised as an observation, having coming from, I think, having the NTC ended, was her observation that every evening there is not just a dinner, it's receptions, receptions and receptions. So there's this free meals and free alcohol, and which has no limitation. And she said that she was concerned that the leaders were very occupied. I mean, you have an all day meeting, then straight into a reception. They have to get up early the next morning and have an all day discussions, well, listening to the ministers making their presentations. So I want to say it like this. I have often spoken about the rights of indigenous peoples,
Mm.
but I have also spoken to our communities at their meetings that indigenous peoples also have their responsibility.
Mm.
So you have a right to be included. We should be demanding, advocating for right to be included. So if there is a conference out here, then the responsibility of the leaders is to make sure that they take the time, that the next day that they can focus, they can be alert, that they can pay attention to what's happening, that they're able to make representations or demand time to make representations. So there is a right, but there's also the responsibility. Um, I have also spoken about my experiences going to attend meetings outside of Guyana, you know, and it's a similar approach that's taken, but perhaps not as, not as heavily streamlined like that. But my point in saying that is being taken out from one area to another area. I have always made sure that I take the work that I'm entrusted with, the role that I'm entrusted with, and commit myself to make sure that I don't miss an opportunity in meetings.
Mm.
And this is me talking about being outside of Guyana, whether in the US, Brazil, Norway, um, Belgium. You know, I have always taken my role very seriously. That because I feel very obligated to indigenous peoples in making, all of this advocacy representation out there. And I'm bringing it back to say that we need to also hold the leaders accountable. And this is not me coming down on the leaders. Perhaps if they felt compelled, if they didn't feel free to choose, that's another thing now that we have to call that on the organizers and the government, by extension, the government.
Mm.
And so let me come to the who the organizers are, dissecting who really has been the organizers. Has it been the National Tushaus Council executive? Was it the core executive? Was it the core executive in conjunction with the staff of the NTC secretariat? Or is it all in conjunction or collaboration with the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs and the government of Guyana, well, the PPP administration? So, and you are right, because this needs to be, or this should be, taking an approach of an indigenous people's parliament. And I said this last week, Friday, Andrew, that when the AFC comes into office next year, it will take such a different approach where indigenous peoples are respected. Their right to decide and their right to organize, and respecting and supporting the freedom of organization and the freedom of voices and the freedom of choice will be respected. But what does that mean? Because part of the action plan of Guyana has really been to formulate just that, like an indigenous people's parliament, but perhaps in a civil society crossing between, or how um, a political, but being able to make political influences in policy design. But that can only come from indigenous peoples. And we have to support indigenous peoples becoming empowered, being so empowered that they're able to advocate strongly for respect to be heard and for decisions to be respected. But if we sit back and allow, for example, the president, the vice president, and the ministers to remind us or to try to teach us, and as I said, there are many young people there who weren't born, um, who were not born before what, the 1980s. There are many, many young Tushaus there. So, in teaching them about the past, but without presenting it in a very balanced manner as to why or how decisions were taking place, but to use it within a whole partisan block,
Mm.
it is wrong. And I keep saying this to indigenous peoples. When you are reminded of how much any party has done, any government, whether it's a PPP, the PNC, and even as the AFC, if you have to be reminded that this is how much we have done for you, I have called on indigenous peoples to remind any political party that it's their obligation to make sure that the welfare of indigenous peoples are respected and provided for, just like any other Guyanese. Right? So that's one of the things I have been saying. So for the PPP to have spent like so much of time presenting biased information, campaigning, using campaign language and using taxpayers' money. This is the money of indigenous peoples as well as taxpayers and citizens. Using citizens' money to present your biased information and your political narrative is an insult to indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
what the NTC was about. And it's
Yeah.
wrong. This is me calling out again the NTC executive, the full executive. Were the statements issued on the NTC page, was that this was were those positions of the full executive and all of the NTC leaders, all of the Tushaus? I don't believe that. That you have to have, that there is a Ministry of Amerindian Affairs issuing a resolution of the NTC from that conference first before it even goes out by the NTC itself, talks about the whole NTC being co-opted by the PPPC administration, and it is wrong. It has to stop, because up to this morning, when I checked the NTC's Facebook page, their resolution is not up there as yet.
Hmm.
It was carried first by the Ministry of Armenian Affairs, and then which other people shared it. But
Hmm.
and I think I said before that I really wish, I really would like to be, or I really would like to call on the Tushaus and the communities to understand that this is not calling out them on the leadership or whatever, because if they're not involved in decision making, for example, on issuing such statements, making political statements, then they need to hold, whether it's the executive, the core executive, persons within the executive, and really work to develop processes to ensure that whoever is doing this is also held accountable, because we are losing opportunities. We're losing respect as indigenous peoples, as to be whether we easily swayed by any political narrative. It should not be like that, because
Hmm.
indigenous peoples' issues remain very much the same. No resolutions, effective resolutions come up with. I know there were photographs of minibuses, ATVs, 4x4s, or whatever. That's okay. That's yours. It's ours. It does not mean that because you're receiving these, you should feel compelled to silence your voice or be fearful to make very strong representations because our issues remain the same.
Mm.
I saw one community. I saw one community that I remember. I remember the PPP pushing so hard for them to accept demarcation, knowing fully well that the lands were covered by mining concessions. And the community was pushing back and saying, we would really like to have a commitment or a firm resolution that either these mining concessions are cleared before we get demarcation, or you make a commitment to find a way, a resolution. There was nothing, no commitment by that. They were instead misled by staff of the land titling department that, if you don't accept this now, the monies are going to go back. And these are the lies, outright lies and insult that are fed to our communities. The community accepted demarcation. And I saw a post by either a councillor or the deputy to show that their situation today remains. They accepted demarcation. But what they have today is their lands, about 70% of their lands, being covered by mining concessions.
Mm.
And as I have said before, when these demarcations are done and with existing whatever third party interests, they get land title, certificates of title that says all of this belongs to you except every other legally owned lands on the lands. It's an insult, it's an illusion,
Mm.
right? But
Um, Laura, while you were talking there, I look at the Kaichur news today. Look at that. I look at the Kaichur news today, and the Tushal from the Upper Mazwani district said that greater, not some, greater transparency, inclusion, and respect in future NTC Council. He said, they're saying here in a statement on Friday that there was an issue with the circulation of the agenda. They said, according to the UMDC, there was a restriction on observers' access. In previous years, indigenous peoples, including technical support staff, were welcome as observers. This year, the UMDC support team was denied entry. Denied entry, despite
so
visible space being available in the observer section. While we understand the need for improved infrastructure and mechanisms of the conference, the transparency behind the accreditation process was lacking. They said here that to show space to speak freely. She said that it is deeply concerned that the Tushals were repeatedly instructed not to repeat points made by other Tushals, even when those issues affect multiple villagers. At the same time, we witnessed government ministers speaking at length, even repeating points, even those already made by other ministers. This is our meeting. Indigenous leaders deserve equal respect and freedom of expression. So they have a problem there. No freedom of expression from the minister, from the Tushals, none. The government saying everything. They went on to say here that the Urban Music District Council called for a dedicated day for Tushals without government's presence. They related that this safe space would allow leaders to interact and learn directly from each other, including possible solutions to share issues. Nothing that it allows them to develop real camaraderie and discuss matter. So no, you can't talk to your fellow Amerindians. No. You can't talk to your fellow Tushals. Oh, no. That is not allowed. You gotta talk. We gotta talk to you. You understand? We gotta talk to you. You can't talk to nobody else. We can tell you really how you're supposed to operate as an arena to show. No, man. That can't happen. You know, and Don, where is Don? I want Don to come in, you know. You know, we need to have, you know, Don, you see the Upper Mazuni District Council saying there is need for more transparency. And this is what prevented from speaking and repeating what another colleague said, but the government could do that alone. I mean, is that what the democracy is? Is that what the National Social Council has gone to right now? The agenda not shared, the agenda not really followed. You know, Tushos can't discuss matters of interest among other Tushos. There can't be no camaraderie. There's no conference among Tushos leaders by themselves without government buying and dying and want to instigate and want to direct and control. How can we avoid this from happening in the future, Don? What needs to be done for us to avoid this from happening in the future, Don? Over to you.
Well, I am not surprised, and I think most of the Tushals were not surprised. I think they expected that to happen under this PPPC government because that has always been their way of hosting NTCs. I must say that the Upper Mazaruni District Council, UMDC, is right, is very correct in saying that there was a lack of transparency, there was a lack of accountability, and there was a lack of access to the conference by observers, and which is it is detrimental to be not to allow, as an indigenous person in this country, when you have concerns and issues, and even to go and observe. It is quite unfortunate that the two shows could not have had, sessions together instead of having that instead of having those receptions night after night. The two shows could have used that time, precious time, to meet together, to talk about issues that are familiar throughout the communities, because many of our communities have similar issues and matters. And it would have been more fruitful if they had had their own little receptions wherever they were staying. If they were staying at a hotel, to use the lobby to have their own discussions, and then to go and have a very good night's sleep instead of staying out late doing other things. And then, because you know what happened to the two show from Isineru, unfortunately. And so they should have taken that into consideration and ensure that these two shows were, having discussions amongst themselves, so that the next day when they go, they would have a lot to discuss and not listening to what the ministers of the government had to say. Yes, they have their place. They can come and say what they have to say within 10 to 15 minutes, but the two shows conference, the time should be used by the two shows to make their representations. Because, Andrew, I was listening, I tuned into some of the days, and thankful for those two shows who went live, even though they were trying to let them not to expose these things. Why do we have to treat our two shows like that? Like little children. They are leaders. When that two show died, I said they are like the mayors of a city. They are the leaders of their community, and they should be treated with total respect. Give them the autonomy to speak to the government. Give them that autonomy and empower them to, to speak on behalf of their people. For example, I did not hear the theme for this year's National Two-Self Conference was robust governance for sustainable village development. Robust governance for sustainable village development. What really is sustainable village development? And I'm speaking about indigenous communities. After listening tuning into some of those things, I heard them talking about how many solar panels they gave to communities, how much monies were spent for these hinterland hubs, etc., etc., which is good. Which is good. But my question is, at the end of the day, were there any robust plans? I did not hear about any robust plans that that would eradicate poverty in our indigenous communities. I try to listen, I try to listen to see what programs and plans that the government has, or the two shows themselves, if given time, probably, perhaps, if given that time to have discussions amongst themselves, they themselves would have came up with some plans and strategies to eradicate poverty in their communities. I did not hear about any robust plans, to preserve our language and culture, to develop and improve our sports activities, because we have known by now our youth in the hinterland are very good at football. We recently had a little under 13 football tournament in Upper Mazaruni, where all the under 13 boys and girls came together at Camarang. And they continue to perform without professional coaches. You could only imagine if these children at an early age were exposed to robust sporting coaches and probably very good sports grounds, improved sports grounds, improved swimming pools. Our children continue to swim in the rivers. When we're having inter-schools competitions, we tie ropes to make lanes, and the children compete in aquatic races. And when they bring them to Georgia, they do well, they perform well. So if you could imagine the government or the agencies responsible for sports in our indigenous communities, if they have these at heart, if they have at heart a true eager to develop our indigenous communities, then we should have heard some of these things coming up. I didn't hear anything about hinterland public services. And I mean like health, education. Our public services must be extended to all corners of our country, and especially and more so in our hinterland communities. We have an ongoing problem with our NIS benefits.
Oh,
Persons
yes.
who are working. I could remember they brought an elderly person from Parima. He couldn't walk, but they insisted that he has to come out in person. And he
Wow.
was flown out of that village just to ensure that he's alive. Why can't we have by now, we have in the resources? You have little NIS office now should be there in Camarang, in the, these remote places whereby people can come. We should have a little GRA office. These are some of the ongoing things. High cost of living, high cost of transportation. I heard Mr. Jagdio was speaking about it, the high cost of air transport. And then I even heard he said, like these private people, when they hear about NTC, they just rise up their prices. How could you say such things? We as a government, you as the government, has to look into these matters and issues and try to find ways on how we can curb the high cost of living. You have air service, which is very, very expensive to travel because there is no other means yet by now presently into the Upper Mazaruni and in many other parts of this country. You still have to depend on the flights to take in everything that you are not being able to grow or access in that region. And so this NTC, I think, was a failure. It did not address the main matters and the issues of our indigenous communities. And that is what I took from this NTC 2025.
Don, I want to show the viewers something here. Okay. Now, this is if you take a look at this here, okay, this here, what you're looking at on your screen, is the Tushau's conference agenda or program outline. Now, if you look here, you would see on day one a whole set of speeches. Right? Vice President and Vice Chair of the National Two Show, yes. Dr. Muhammad Ibn Ali, okay. When you come down to the other part of the program, day one, look here. Adoption of the NTC agenda, yes, fine. Presentation of NTC report and draft resolution. Look here. Interaction session. Ongoing projects based on success story, challenges, best practices, and next steps. Video presentation, a whole long thing. That's where the NTC, fine. Okay. Close of the day. But when you come down to day two, viewers, there's a whole set of ministries. Hey, watch it. Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Brigadier Mark Phillips. Vice President Barrett Jack Dio. You come down here. Minister of Agriculture. Ministry of Natural Resources. What was the right interaction session with the Minister of with Excellency and Sector Ministers on what? More government talking, local government talking, housing talking, Ministry of Tourism talking, all them talking, right? You come down to day 4, more ministry come down there again. So we need to show them the talking, boy. We need to show them talking to themselves. We need to show them discussing the issues that matters most to them. Where there? Where is it? It is nowhere to be found. You can't see nothing. It's true what Don said. Okay, it's a talk shop and annex.
Yeah.
I mean,
Andrew, I want to echo the sentiments of Don in regards to nothing being done and the failure of this National Two Shows Conference, because the PPPC government are afraid of the word decentralization. They want people to be able to come to them to deal with matters that should be necessity to the lives of Guyanese, not only Guyanese living in Georgetown, but the Guyanese that lives at the far end of this country. So decentralization, and I mean, those are matters that we've been focusing on during the 2015-2020 coalition government. There were large public services that would have been decentralized by the coalition government. And that was something that the PPPC government, when they came back into power in 2020, done away with. You know, all those GRA offices and all of those NIS and all those offices that provided public services to the country were closed down, where doors were shut, and we went back to the same old PPPC government prior to 2015. So we've looked at it. We've saw the agenda by the National Two Show Conference, and it was indeed a PPPC campaign agenda. There's nothing that would have been discussed there that would have benefited the lives of our indigenous brothers and sisters. There's nothing, and it's a complete lack of endorsement and a lack of responsibility from this government, coming from His Excellency from day one straight down to the Vice President, and they continuously say that, you know, they stand with the indigenous people of Guyana. And you know, we've seen it from time again. And this one here in 2025 has been the most they've done, the biggest failure of the National Two Shows Conference.
Like I said, the National Two Show Council's Conference is a mini parliament.
Yeah,
it's a mini parliament for Amerindian people, indigenous people. It's like the UN. When you go to the UN, when you have UN discussion on Amerindian affairs, who's leading? Who's discussing the matters? Who's bringing up the issues?
Not even an indigenous person.
It's not the UN people I'm taking over the thing. It is indigenous people who's speaking. This here is a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And it's true. I'm really given a day where they discuss matters among themselves. Hey, what's happening in your district? What's going on in your district? What we could do to help? How can we come together?
All we saw was engagements after engagements, dinners after dinner, and we saw nothing fruitful. I guess
and
peppering them up and providing food and drinks to them was what the most that they could have done, and that is not what the indigenous people of Guyana
Waste of
want.
taxpayers' money. Waste of
And
taxpayers' money.
Andrew and Onyx and Don, it's every single ministry, well, mostly education, health, have reports coming to them every month. And I keep saying this, reports coming to them every month, every quarter, every year. Reports of what the situation is, needs, what like whether it's medication, whether it's furniture, whether it's personnel in health or education. Every single month, every single quarter, every single year. Then you have other workers like I don't know if you call them probation workers, but they have these workers also submitting reports of what needs to be done in the regions. You also have the RDCs. The RDC reps that talk about these things are the RDC meetings. So the regional meetings that also should be correlating with the from the central government.
Mhm.
But so then, and then in addition to that, you have ministerial outreaches. Village councils make reports to the Ministry of Natural Resources, GGMC, Forestry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs all the time. So it is not for lack of having knowledge or wanting knowledge or about situations that impact indigenous communities. As I said, the ministers go on their outreaches. We know that they're going out there to campaign. We know that. But they call it government outreaches. So when you have all of these things taking place, all of these different mechanisms, but you're not providing a recourse, effective response, but you're bringing them to Georgetown to say, look, it's only it's only the PPP have done this for you. Again, that reminder as though you're doing us a favor. It's an insult to indigenous peoples. And I want to support Don's recommendation that the whole service provision to indigenous peoples need to be decentralized. When I was
Yeah.
at the APA, these were recommendations I made over the years at different forums for different ministries and different policy discussions. Decentralize these services for indigenous peoples to access just as any other Guyanese. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand we don't have the best services already because to get a passport, look, the process we got to go through in Georgetown.
Come to
People have
Georgetown.
to go there, yeah, in Georgetown. People have to go line up there since 4 or 5 o'clock. And then they tell you, oh, we already have a quotation for today. So you have to come
Yeah.
back tomorrow.
Yeah.
That has been the process in Georgetown. So I mean, so I can imagine.
And imagine the
Trying,
amount of money you have to spend on transportation.
yes, and so trying to calling for that to be decentralized would have been a challenge, anyways. But my point is, the government of Guyana has been violating the rights of indigenous peoples to equal access to services and everything else. Because we have to travel all the time to Georgetown, as Don was pointing out earlier, to get an NIS. We have to, we have to. They've asked that they see the person to make sure that they're still alive. You know, and we have to find money, which is more. It is more. It costs more than the actual money that is being paid by NIS.
But Don, I mean, Laura, when the AP and ELC government was in power, we decentralized these things.
Most of
We
public
had
services.
under the Minister of Citizenship, he
Felix.
had
Mr.
right.
Felix.
He had offices in those regions for NIS, for passports, and all of that.
Immigration
Someone
officer.
came in and got rid of all of it.
Well, I can say,
Yeah.
Andrew, that there were efforts to do that, right? They say it was not It didn't take place like fully. So, for example, like in Region 8 in the North Pacaraimos, one of the most expensive regions, similar to the Upper Mazaruni, we did not get those services, get them established there as yet. But I do know that there was a process. A process started to have it decentralized. I remember Latam
Yeah.
for the first time was having this passport office. I don't know if it's still there, but I know that there was a lot of hope that all of these things could have been done a lot quicker. It's not happening
Yeah.
as yet, right? So we really need to have those going to the communities. Um, like for example, this whole thing about the application for gun licenses. I'll tell you this: indigenous peoples have had to justify why they need these guns, which is okay, and they're largely shotguns, the shotguns that families need to be able to provide a meal for the family. Um, so and then there many letters go back to them to say that for whatever reason it's turned down, and they have to use a recourse, an appeal process, writing to the president of Guyana to appeal the decision of the Commission of Police.
Well, Laura, right now, the president recently said that he's going to give guns to the Americans now. Why? Because the Venezuelans are there, they're coming. He's going to give you guns now. But when you asked for
Well,
it before, you weren't getting it. But now you can get it.
well,
You know, you get it on the pretense, under a different situation.
yeah,
Why was
well,
it not given before?
so that was me coming back to saying it's an insult to
Yeah.
indigenous peoples,
Yes.
because for the last 5 years, and you haven't responded. You haven't responded in the way that regulations are made in place, process is enhanced, that is more accessible for indigenous peoples. But suddenly, so you want to approve 250 guns. I can't remember if you said it's for the Tushaus or it's for persons who had applied. But I know that there are perhaps thousands of applications from indigenous peoples who've been saying we need to have our gun licenses, because the next thing you know, he spoke. Barjagdio spoke about at one point you were jailed for what's in your pot. But I want him to also know that he wasn't being truthful as to what's happening today. That for indigenous peoples, mostly the fathers, trying to get, trying to have a gun, desperately trying to provide for what is in the pot, to provide for pot for the children, they have faced prison time because they're told that the shotgun that they have is illegal. So they're imprisoned for that. But the government doesn't make a response to say, you know what, let's make this law or a regulation specific for indigenous peoples to be able to access this better, quicker, easier. And I have said before, Andrew, that indigenous peoples are not looking for special treatment. We're looking for treatment that accessibility is enhanced, that indigenous peoples are on the equal footing to access the same services that
That's
the
a good one.
government of Guyana has for its citizens. So we're not seeking special treatment. We're not seeking to be illegal or unlawful citizens. We are saying that the laws that exist currently does not meet or does not respond to the needs of indigenous peoples. We need equal access. So one law, one regulation, one mechanism does not meet our needs. So the government has the obligation to make it work, to do something to make it work. And to do something, do they not know what to do? No, it's not that they don't know. Because indigenous leaders, I know, have been vocal over the years, making recommendations, making requests to the government. So they have no excuse.
And Don, and Laura, these are some of the things that Amarini was supposed to be discussing amongst themselves and bringing it to the government and say, here, these are our concerns. please address them. Please make it happen. But it didn't happen like that. They were talked down to, and they were given nothing but lies, but
People not
propaganda.
keen on recommendations,
Yeah. Anyhow,
once it's not coming from them.
So
we are running out
right.
of time. But before you go, before we end, Laura, I mean, you have some final thoughts. I want you to get them out first because we are out of time. We have a little time left, but I want to give you a time to give your closing remarks. I'm going to ask Dawn to do the same thing, or closing remarks. But go ahead, Laura.
So I just want to call on Indigenous peoples to continue calling for your right to be respected, access to equal services, protected effectively by laws. Um, today, Today, Venezuela has gone ahead to have elections of its governor for the Essequibo region. They say for the Essequibo region, but I want to call and remind on indigenous peoples in Guyana that this land is ours, this land is our home, and not to be intimidated by the Venezuelan government and the aggression. We have to ensure that as Guyanese citizens, we continue to call out on Venezuela to refrain and from and that to respect that Essequibo is Guyana and we are all Guyana. And I'm saying this because majority of indigenous peoples live in the Essequibo region and we have known it to be our home from time immemorial. Just continue amplifying the voice for respect, protection, and that the Maduro administration respect us as indigenous peoples on our homelands. And again, as we go, just let's, and to the leaders, I want to say this specifically. Tushaus, you have the right as an individual to support a political party of your choice. As an individual, it is not your role as a Tushau to make statements, blanket statements, or broad statements rather, promoting and propagating any political party, not the PPP, not the PNC, not the AFC, not anybody. In your role as a Toshao, your obligation is to the people. And your obligation is also to respect the right of your own residents in the villages, the right to choose and the freedom to choose. We should not be allowing any group, any particular or political party to intimidate your own residents from choosing freely or from entering the villages. You have your regulations, your village rules. Apply all of those, but it should be applied to everyone. So, so refrain from the political party or the PPP's intimidation and misleading tactics. You are the Toshao elected by your people. Respect your people's right to choose and your people's right to be free. I just want to say that because I know the campaign thing is going to increase, and we need to also stand by our people and respect their right to choose as citizens of Guyana and in the villages. That's all I
That
want to say.
that is Laura George there for you. Dawn, it's your turn. You can come on up and let us hear your closing comments. If Dawn is there, is she still there? I am not seeing her. Not seeing her. Oh yes, she is. Yeah, yes, Dawn. Your closing comments before we go. You want to tell the Tushaus and the indigenous people's community on the way forward.
Okay, I want to end my discussion. I'll conclude by saying to the two shows, all the two shows throughout this entire the plus two shows and senior counselors. I want you to note that our indigenous peoples, we as indigenous peoples, are known to be stewards of our forest, and our stewardship has always compatible with the conservation goal throughout the world. And today we are being recognized. And because of that, I always feel that we were robbed as indigenous people by this government for not consulting with us, for not adhering to the free, prior, FPIC consultation. Our leaders, I cannot recall when the day or the time when our indigenous leaders were brought to Georgetown, if they were so interested, or brought them in sub-district at one point to have this robust discussion on the resources, the financial resources that we would have gotten from preserving. I can't recall any time when these two shows were given an opportunity to say how much of this resources should be given back to our indigenous community. But it was told to us, it was announced by the government that you are going to receive 15% of this. Who came up with that figure? And so I always say that was the biggest blunder the PPP meant. If they were so interested in recognizing us and respecting us as the stewards of the forest, preserving the forest and have the forest standing so that we can be paid monies for the carbon credits, the first people should have been consulted, and they would have been able to say how much they should receive in return. But that was not done. And so that was like an insult to our intelligence. Like we don't know. Because I can recall there was a conference, the first, not consulting, this LCDS program came on. We were not in government. They were in government. And they went to Cameron to have consultation, they call it, but we call it information sharing. That is what we said. They went to ensure, and a young person stood up to ask the question, if I have this hectares of piece of land, how much carbon credits? How do I calculate? And they couldn't answer them. How much do I know? How much carbon credit, I know that is coming out of this piece of land? They couldn't answer. So they think of us as stupid. Well, none else than Mr. Jagdew himself that some Guyanese are stupid. So they think that we are stupid. They don't know that we have the intelligence and ways of preserving our forests and them standing. And so that was like an insult to our indigenous people. And to this date, I still see it as an insult because there was no FPIC and no consultation made. And to close off, I want to reiterate what Ms. Laura said to my indigenous brothers and sisters throughout the country. Let us remember that Essequibo was always ours. Since we came, our great-great-grandfathers, when they came, we crossed the Bering Strait, then walked down, we crossed mountains, valleys, rivers, creeks. We know the names of the rivers and creeks and mountains and rocks throughout Essequibo rivers, creeks, and its tributaries. Many of these places were trodden by our great-grandparents. And that's why we call many of the places in Essequibo as our ancestral lands. There are times also some educated people, even in the government, say there is nothing like ancestral lands and these things. And you know, it boggles my mind when people speak like that. Because I can go to any part in the Upper Mazaruni, at a mountain foot or in a creek, and I will find some artifacts. There is something to say that people were living there for some piece of time, for some time. So saying to us that Essequibo does not belong to us by the Venezuelan government, we should not listen and we should not be intimidated. We must stand up firm to say that Essequibo belongs to us and Essequibo belongs to Guyana. That must be told to our children or great-great-grandchildren. That must be said throughout this entire country. So with that, thank you for having me again, Andrew, and to your viewers.
Yes, Dawn and also George. We miss Lillian. Lillian could not have made it today. We could not have her on. She was on another appointment, but we're going to get her back sometime. We also want to reiterate to you, the viewing public, that we have lost a very stalwart in our country. We have lost the great Valerie Carrillo this morning, and we are going to give you updates as to the way forward pertaining to the wake and the funeral and what the AFC will do, and all of that will come up in a short while, and we're going to keep you up to date as to what is going to be taking place moving forward. So that's our program this morning. Matter of fact, it is 12:13 in the PM, and so we want to thank you for viewing our program today. We're going to see you right back here next Sunday for another edition of the Countdown. Goodbye. Have a safe rest of your holiday. It is going to be Independence.
Happy
tomorrow.
Independence to all.
Happy Independence to all of you. Dawn, happy Independence. George, happy Independence.
Happy
Diana is
Independence.
Leon. Essequibo is Leon.
Essequibo is Guyana.
Essequibo is Guyana. Remember that.
Yes.
Let them remember that.
You guys
always feel with us the main hours.
Independent and Essequibo belongs to us. Thank you.
Thank you guys, and
Bye-bye.
enjoy the rest of your day.